The morning was cool and gray when Mara arrived at the train station. The sun was still low, hidden behind a thin layer of clouds that made the sky look like a quiet watercolor painting. She moved slowly, her small steps echoing softly against the stone tiles beneath her shoes. People around her walked quickly, rushing to catch trains, check schedules, and get on with their lives. No one noticed the young woman who kept her head down, holding her worn canvas bag tightly against her chest as if it were a shield. She was tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from a single sleepless night, but the kind that settles deep inside, a tiredness of the heart and mind. She had not eaten much in days. She had not spoken to anyone in even longer. Her body ached, but it wasn't just the ache of exhaustion. It was the kind that comes from carrying too much pain for too long. Still, she walked forward, as if some invisible force was pushing her to keep moving. Mara's sweater hung loosely around her, a few threads pulled out at the sleeves. Her jeans were slightly torn at the knees. Her shoes, once white, were now the color of city dust. She didn't look at the people around her, but she could feel their presence, strong, fast, alive. It made her feel even smaller. She glanced up at the station's giant clock. The hands showed 7:42 a.m. A few pigeons fluttered near the rafters above. A train arrived on the opposite platform with a gust of wind that swept across the station, lifting a strand of her hair into her face. She brushed it away slowly, as if even that simple movement took effort. Mara had been walking for hours before she reached the station. Her legs were shaky. She had tried to keep herself calm, repeating small thoughts in her mind, the way people might whisper prayers to themselves when they're lost. It's okay. Just breathe. Keep going. The words weren't strong, but they kept her on her feet. The noise of the trains and footsteps blended into a soft roar. People hurried past her with coffee cups and suitcases, some with phones pressed to their ears, others laughing with friends. No one saw the quiet girl standing near the pillar, clutching her bag like she might fall without it. She leaned against the cold stone wall, pressing her back to it. Her breath came in short bursts. She didn't know what she was waiting for. Maybe she wasn't waiting for anything. Maybe she was just standing because she didn't know what else to do. A man bumped into her shoulder as he rushed by, and though it wasn't hard, it made her stumble a step. She whispered a soft sorry, even though she wasn't the one at fault. He didn't even turn around. She pulled the sleeves of her sweater over her hands and tried to steady herself. A soft ringing filled her ears, the kind that happens when someone is too tired to stay awake. Her vision began to blur at the edges like a camera slowly losing focus. She blinked a few times, hoping it would clear, but the blur only grew. The clock above her seemed to sway slightly, though it was fixed to the wall. She tried to take a step forward. Her legs trembled. Her heartbeat quickened, not from fear but from weakness. The bag slipped slightly from her arms, but she caught it clumsily. She looked around for somewhere to sit, but all the benches were full. She thought of asking someone to help, but her voice felt too small. She couldn't even imagine herself speaking loud enough for anyone to hear. She tried to walk toward the bench anyway. One step, then another. Then everything began to spin. The sound of people talking grew distant, like they were speaking from underwater. A rush of heat went to her face, then her knees gave way beneath her. She didn't even have time to break the fall. She dropped to the floor, landing on her side. Her bag slipped from her arms. A few people gasped softly. A few glanced her way, but most just kept moving, their eyes sliding over her like she was invisible. For a few seconds she lay still, her mind struggling to catch up with what had happened. The cold floor pressed against her cheek. The smell of train oil and metal filled her nose. She wanted to get up to tell people she was fine, but her arms felt too heavy. A woman nearby shook her head, muttering something under her breath, and walked away. A young man paused, looked for a moment, then turned toward his train. People weren't cruel. They were just busy. Everyone had somewhere to go, and Mara, small, quiet Mara, was not part of anyone's plan. Then through the blur, she heard a sound. It was different from the rest. A slow, steady rhythm of boots on the platform. Not rushed like the others. Not hesitant. It was the sound of someone who wasn't just passing by. Cal had arrived at the station only a few minutes earlier. He wasn't from the city. He wasn't used to the noise or the crowd. He had grown up on wide, open land where the wind carried the sound of horses and crickets, not trains and horns. He wore a faded denim jacket, a wide-brimmed hat, and boots that told a story of miles walked across dusty roads. He was in town for a livestock auction, a trip he made once a year. He didn't know anyone here, and he liked it that way. He preferred the quiet of his ranch, but something about the city always made him pay attention. As he scanned the platform, his eyes caught the figure on the ground. A young woman, still pale, with a bag a few feet away. People were moving around her, stepping aside but not stopping. His steps slowed, then stopped altogether. Cal had a simple way of seeing the world. When someone needed help, you helped. That's how he was raised. That's how the people in his small town lived. He walked toward her, his boots making a clear, steady sound with each step. The crowd didn't quite notice him at first. He kneeled beside her, his hat casting a small shadow over his eyes. "Miss," he said gently. His voice was deep but soft. She didn't respond. He tapped her shoulder lightly, careful not to startle her. Her eyes fluttered open just enough to meet his. They were tired eyes, the kind that told a quiet story without words. "Hey, stay with me," he said calmly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't panic. His calmness was steady, like the ground beneath a shaky bridge. Someone nearby finally stopped and asked, "Is she okay?" "I don't know yet," Cal answered, already pulling his phone from his pocket. He called for help with the same quiet strength. His voice wasn't loud, but people listened. A few others began to gather, forming a small circle around them. Someone ran to find station staff. Mara blinked slowly, her lips parting slightly as she tried to speak, but no words came. Cal adjusted his jacket and gently slid it under her head as a cushion. "You're safe," he said. He didn't know her. She didn't know him. But those two words made her eyes flutter again, as if they reached a place deep inside her that hadn't felt safe in a long time. The wind swept through the station as another train passed. Mara shivered slightly. Cal noticed and gently pulled his jacket tighter around her shoulders. The sound of footsteps and announcements filled the air, but around her, everything seemed to slow down. She didn't know why he stopped. She didn't know why he cared. But in that moment, she wasn't invisible anymore. Someone had seen her. Someone had knelt beside her. When the station staff arrived with a small medical team, Cal stayed right where he was. He explained what happened, steady and clear. He helped them lift her carefully onto a stretcher. Mara, half conscious, caught a final glimpse of his hat as the platform lights blurred above her. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone on the cold ground. Someone had chosen to stand still when everyone else kept walking. Someone had noticed. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of a small machine in the corner. The walls were painted a pale shade of cream, the kind of color meant to keep people calm. Morning light slipped through the half-open blinds, drawing thin silver lines across the floor. Mara slowly opened her eyes. For a few seconds, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling above her looked different from the one she had seen at the station. The smell was different too, clean, like soap and something faintly sweet. It wasn't the smell of train tracks and cold stone. She blinked a few times, trying to piece her memory together. Then she felt it, a soft, warm weight across the lower half of her blanket. She turned her head slightly and saw a worn denim jacket carefully folded across her legs. The sight made something stir deep inside her chest. It wasn't hers. She remembered it from the platform. The man who had knelt beside her. Her heart gave a soft, uneven beat. She wasn't used to kindness, not this kind. She thought he might have just handed her to the staff and walked away like most people would have done. But when she turned her head a little more, she saw him. Cal sat in a chair near the foot of her bed, his hat resting on his knee, one hand loosely folded under his chin. His eyes were closed, his breathing slow and steady. It was clear he had been there for hours. His boots still carried a bit of dust from the station floor. His denim jacket had been hers for the night. Mara lay still, watching him quietly. She didn't understand why he stayed. She didn't even know his name yet. But the sight of someone being there, not because they had to, but because they chose to, made the corners of her eyes sting. A nurse walked in softly, carrying a clipboard and a gentle smile. "You're awake," she whispered kindly. "You gave everyone a bit of a scare." Mara's voice came out small, a little rough from sleep. "Where am I?" "You're at the city hospital," the nurse explained, checking the machines beside her. "You fainted at the station. But you're safe now." She gave Mara a reassuring smile. "You were lucky someone saw you and called for help right away." Mara's eyes shifted back to Cal. The nurse followed her gaze and smiled wider. That gentleman hasn't left your side since you came in. He waited here all night, even offered his jacket to keep you warm. Mara's lips parted, but no sound came out. She didn't know what to say. No one had waited for her in a very long time. The nurse patted her hand lightly. You rest now. Doctor will check on you soon. She left the room as quietly as she had entered. Cal stirred when Mara tried to sit up. His eyes opened slowly, and when he saw her awake, his face softened. Well, he said in a low, steady voice. Good morning. Mara held the blanket closer, suddenly aware of how fragile she must look. You stayed? She asked softly. He nodded, shifting in his chair. Seemed like the right thing to do. Her eyes lowered. She wasn't used to people doing the right thing for her. He picked up his hat and placed it gently on his knee. I figured you shouldn't wake up alone in a place like this. His voice was simple, no big speeches, just quiet honesty. Mara couldn't look at him for a moment. She stared at the pale cream wall instead. You didn't have to. Maybe not, Cal replied. But I wanted to. His words were like a soft blanket laid gently over a tired heart. No questions. No pressure. Just a calm presence that made the air feel less heavy. Later that afternoon, after the doctor confirmed she was going to be okay, Mara sat up in bed, slowly sipping warm tea. The window beside her looked out at the gray sky. The city looked far away from up here. Cal stood by the window looking out with the kind of ease that came from being more comfortable with silence than words. Mara finally asked the question sitting in her chest. Why did you stop? He turned to her, adjusting his hat slightly. Because someone needed to, he said simply. She let out a shaky breath. A lot of people saw me. No one stopped. He looked at her gently. That doesn't mean you weren't worth helping. Something inside her cracked softly. Not in pain, but in the quiet way frozen rivers begin to thaw when the sun touches them. For the next hour they talked in small pieces. Not a full conversation. Just small, soft exchanges. She told him her name. He told her his. She didn't tell him everything about her life, but she didn't need to. He never asked for explanations. Cal shared a little about where he came from. A ranch outside the city, miles of open land, quiet nights with stars you could actually see. He talked about horses, the smell of hay, the sound of early mornings when the sun painted everything gold. He spoke slowly, the way people do when they've learned to live without rushing. Mara listened like someone drinking water after being thirsty for too long. She didn't know why, but his words made her feel like there was a world beyond the walls of what she had known, a world not built on fear or exhaustion but on something softer, something steady. When evening came, Cal stood up slowly. I should let you rest, he said. They'll probably keep you here another night to make sure you're all right. She nodded, but there was a quiet weight in her chest at the thought of him leaving. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card with slightly bent corners. If you ever need anything, he said, handing it to her, or just need a place where you can breathe for a while. This is where I'll be. Mara stared at the card. It had his name, Cal, and an address that didn't look like anywhere near the city. Why would you do this for me? She whispered. Because everyone deserves someone to stop for them at least once, he said. Then he gave a small nod and walked toward the door. She watched him go, her fingers tightening around the card like it was something fragile and precious. A week passed. Mara was discharged with a soft blanket the nurse had given her, a small bag of her things and Cal's card still in her pocket. She returned to the city's crowded streets. The world moved fast again. People still passed each other without looking. But something inside her was different now. Every time she felt the world closing in, her hand brushed against the card. It reminded her of a voice that had said, "You don't have to wake up alone." She found a small temporary room through a local shelter, started helping in their kitchen in the mornings. She didn't talk much, but she listened. And slowly she began to feel her strength return, like sunlight creeping into a room that had been dark for a long time. Still, she thought about Cal often. The way he had knelt down at the station, the quiet patience in his voice, the calm that wrapped around her like a warm jacket. 3 weeks after she left the hospital, Mara stood in front of a mirror. Her sweater was new, not fancy but clean. Her hair was brushed, tied loosely behind her. Her eyes, though still soft and careful, had a spark that wasn't there before, She looked at the card again. The edges were a little more worn from being held so many times. She took a breath. Then another. Then she packed her bag, not the way she did when running, but the way someone does when they are ready to move forward. She caught a bus heading out of the city. The scenery changed slowly. The buildings gave way to trees, the gray streets to open fields. The air outside the bus window felt cleaner, lighter. She leaned her head against the glass and closed her eyes, letting the hum of the road calm her heart. When the bus stopped at the small dusty road, she stepped out and looked around. The sky stretched wide and endless. There were no crowds here, just a soft breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers and soil. Ahead she saw a wooden gate with a simple sign carved by hand. She recognized the address from the card. Mara stood there for a long moment, her heart beating a little faster, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The sound of footsteps came from the path ahead. Cal appeared, his hat tipped slightly, the same calm smile on his face. He didn't seem surprised. He just said softly, "Well, look who made it." Mara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She smiled, not a big smile, but a real one. "I wasn't sure if I should come," she said honestly. "I'm glad you did," he replied. He opened the gate for her, not like a man rescuing someone, but like a friend welcoming someone home. The ranch stretched out behind him like something from a different world. There were horses grazing lazily in the field, their tails flicking at flies. The sun cast a soft gold light over the fence posts. A dog barked somewhere near the barn. The wind was gentle. Cal walked beside her as they entered. "You don't owe anyone here a story," he said quietly. "You just get to breathe." Mara's eyes grew soft. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words again. Over the next few weeks, Mara stayed at the ranch. She helped with small tasks, feeding the animals, brushing the horses, walking down to the creek at sunset. Every day she grew a little stronger. Her shoulders straightened a little more. Her steps grew steadier. She laughed a little too, at first softly, then with more warmth. Cal never asked her to explain her past. He just let her build her own quiet space one sunrise at a time. Sometimes they sat on the porch together in silence, watching the stars appear one by one. She liked that he didn't try to fill the silence. He respected it. The nights were calm here. No trains, no rushing crowds. Just the soft sounds of crickets and wind through the trees. For the first time in a long time, Mara could sleep without waking in fear. Months passed. The bruises on her body faded long ago, but more importantly, the bruises inside her heart began to heal too. She learned to take care of the horses.